Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Joshua and I'm going to be your presenter. It is 1 p.m. Eastern Time here on Wednesday afternoon. Before we get started on our topic, which is basically accounting topic, paying one vendor but printing two separate checks to that same vendor or payee. Before we get started on that, a few things. First, click on the little red arrow on the right side of your sidebar of your webinar control panel to minimize that webinar control panel, get it out of the way, or drag it off to your second desktop if you have a dual monitor setup. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. My audio appears to be coming through okay. We are recording today's webinar event. The recording of this event will be available on the Support Center page at our website here within the next week or 10 days or so. If you do want to revisit it, it will be available eventually here. Please, if you have questions for me, type those into the questions portion of the webinar control panel. I'll do my best to keep an eye on those, repeat the question for everybody's benefit, and then we'll see what we can't do to get those questions or that question answered. Please keep the questions on topic. Meaning about the paying bills, again, and where two payments are involved or two checks are involved regarding the payee or vendor. If you ask me other questions on the software, it may not be because I don't want to answer it for you. It's just either I'm unequipped to, or my thought process isn't there, or it might be something which is specific to your data. There may be another webinar event that's more suited to the question that you have or to what you're asking about, or maybe just call technical support, our support staff to get your question answered about that. So I may put off questions to support or something else, or just, not be able to answer that question for you today. But we're certainly happy to help if necessary on our support calls. Our support staff are. Our workbook today, the topic today is taken from A103, Accounting 103 workbook, pages 33 to 35. Frankly, folks, this is going to be probably a really short webinar event. It's not going to take more than probably 10 or 15 minutes here to get through this topic, maybe less. So again, just not typically long, 15 or 20-minute event like they usually are. So let's dive in. Okay. So basically, sometimes there is a need to enter a bill to a vendor or enter bills to a vendor, a bill to a vendor, but we want to print two separate checks or have two separate checks recorded for those, okay, for those payments, okay? Two different checks, whether they're, manual checks or computer checks, there are processes in order to how to do that depending on the payment method in question, okay? So in order to be able to the best and easiest way and only way really to do it in many cases is to enter the bills as two separate independent invoices. And what that means is that when we go into our enter bills window here, and if we say, okay, leaves today's date, and we're going to type in American Electric Power, so we're going to pay our electric bill, for the church and for our parsonage. So if I come down here and I type in under my expense account electric, we notice we've got two separate expense accounts. Electric, which would be the church electric, and then rental electric for our rental property or for our whatever, our separate expense. So if I choose the electric and I enter the, church's electric bill amount there, okay, if I tab over and I go up to above that and I do my rental electric, okay, and I enter that here as my amount here, and I click Done, Add to Batch, that's not two separate invoices, okay? That's not going to allow me to print two separate checks, at least not using the computer check function the way that the system is designed to do that, okay? So what it's talking about when we're talking about separate invoices is we remove the line from this bill for the church, for the rental property. We then click Done, Add to Batch, okay, going down here. Then we go back up and we enter another line for American Electric Power. Tab down, and here we'll choose our rental electric. and I'll again type in the amount of that particular bill. Can be separate expenses, doesn't have to be a different or separate expense account. Okay, we just have to make sure that we're clicking the done add to batch in between each one of those bills. So the system, yes, and of course if I did have different invoices for them, you know, I would certainly put those in here under my invoice number, you know, entering any desired comments and due date, done add to batch. So I now have two separate bills here at the bottom, okay? So if I go up here and I do 94574, what have you, even they might be back-to-back invoices per the company, doesn't matter. They don't have to have separate invoice numbers entered. They just have to be separate bills, okay? So once I've got the two separate line items here at the bottom, I can then choose post and pay these bills, okay? So then it pops up and asks me, do I want to print my checks? And I'm going to, or print my, payment list of bill transactions. We're going to click no. It then takes a second, and it now opens up my, you know, my pay bills window here with my AEP vendor selected with both of those invoices highlighted here. You see that? The pay now box is checked next to each one of these particular separate invoices. Okay, hopefully everybody can see my arrow there. But that still doesn't tell the system that I want separate checks, okay, to print them, okay? What does that? What controls that is over here on the right-hand side where it says separate payment. Does everybody see that over here on the right? They've got the different separate check boxes for that. So by checking separate payment next to my two different invoices here, I'm now telling the system that I want to print two separate checks, okay? And the most important part about this, and this is the caveat on this, is that the separate payment function only works when we're choosing our payment method of computer check, okay? Any other payment methods that we select, whether it's manual checks or EFT or, you know, any of the other payment methods that are in this list, cash, EFT, debit card, credit card, manual check, the separate payment function doesn't work, okay? Because the system doesn't give us an opportunity to enter the two separate check numbers, okay? So we're going to complete this here. So we're going to choose computer check, check the two different invoices, then we're going to click post and print checks. We're not going to print the payment transactions, but it now then should open up our print checks window, and we should have two clearly distinct and separate payment transactions or checks waiting to print here for American Electric Power, and we do, okay? So you've got, you know, check number one, check number two. I can now print separate checks with different check numbers to two different checks to American Electric Power here, okay? All right, so computer check is the only one that allows us to do that because the check numbers are entered here, not at the payment when we're posting the payment transaction, okay? So the check number here can be entered here separately. That's why that allows us to do that, okay? So to conclude this in terms of how this works for you, really great that we can print two separate paint checks for computer prepared checks using that. But what if we're not doing computer prepared checks, okay? So if we go back to pay bills and I go up to quick pay and say view outstanding bills, we notice here that I've got two separate bills for AT&T, one for $61.98 and another one for $125 for a total account balance of $86.98. But if I check both of those invoices, click create payments, and I choose my payment method of, say, manual check, okay, no place up here, you know, to the right of either one of these invoices allows me to put in two different check numbers for each one of these payments, okay, for manual checks. And again, this is true for EFT or debit card or credit card, okay? So how we have to do that here for this is if we're writing manual checks is we have to uncheck the invoice, first invoice here for the 125, leave the one invoice that we're recording the payment for, choose our manual check, type in our check number, and click Post. Okay? No to print. Then go back up to Quick Pay, View Outstanding Bills, choose my next invoice for AT&T, click Create Payments, Pay Now, Manual Check, and type in my check number for that. Okay? And Post. So that, now I've got two separate payments posted to AT&T for the same date, different payment types, different checks that show up on my bank reconciliation to clear as withdrawals from my checking account. Okay? So that's the fundamental difference, is our payment method. Okay? Separate payment only works for computer prepared checks, okay, to the same payee. All right? If I have two different bills entered to different vendors, not a problem. I can go in and record separate bills to each of those and print separate checks, but if they're both to the same vendor, then the only way that I can print two separate checks in one session essentially is to do the computer checks in separate payments. Okay? But frankly, folks, like I said, it was going to be a short one. That's pretty much it for our topic today. Okay? So let's see here. What questions do we have? Why then does separate payment show on the screen for manual? Sandra, that's a great question. I don't have an answer for that. I'm sorry. This may be something that our developers continue to look at with regards to that, but that's an absolutely valid and completely great question. So I don't have an answer. Logic says if manual check is being selected, that separate payment should be unavailable for that, and that's probably will be something I'll go in and I'll get into suggestions here to our developers as to why that isn't changed. Good question. I'm being asked now, can I enter several invoices before adding to batch and have different invoices showing on my check? No, because each one of those the add to batch items, Rita, does represent a separate invoice. So if you're talking about going back here to enter bills, yeah, no, I can choose a particular vendor. Let me see. Let me choose one here from our list. Let's see here. Big City Utilities. So down here, I can enter invoice A here, but down here it still only allows me to choose one expense. It's all considered one invoice number. Okay, that's not the account I wanted to choose. It's something down here. Okay, and so I enter this here. But basically, without clicking Done Add to Batch, it's all considered one single invoice. So if I have separate invoices, I have to click Done Add to Batch. I can still pay them on one check. So just because they're entered and posted as separate bills doesn't mean I can't combine them onto one check. The topic today was how to print two separate checks. I can always choose, 10 different bills and print one check, okay? Or I can post them all as 10 different expenses as part of the same bill and create one bill transaction, okay? Again, another great question. All right, well, I don't see any... Well, okay, sorry, so then why does it allow another line? Well, you can certainly enter invoices numbers under like the line item comments or the transaction comments, but the invoice field at the top of the window is basically for the entire entry that you're entering, not for a specific line item. So again, the only way to add different invoices would be to choose vendor and expense A with its amount, done, add to batch. Now I can go up and reselect the same vendor, the same or different expense and enter a different invoice number. Yeah, it's simply how the software is designed. Absolutely. My pleasure, of course. Okay. All right, folks. I'm not seeing anything else coming in here. Again, the video for this or recording for this event will be available on our website here within the next week or 10 days if you'd like to revisit that. There may be something out on the Support Center now about that from a previous video or recording from a previous webinar. But You're very welcome. I hope it's been helpful for everybody. And please check out the free online webinars page for the upcoming or remaining list of March webinar events. We are working on the April events now. We hope to see everybody at another future webinar event. All right. Have a great day. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.